Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift back through time, back to a world lit by fire and governed by faith, to try and understand a concept that, for 1,000 years, held a deep and pervasive power over the Western mind. Imagine yourself not in your comfortable bed, but on a simple straw mattress, the scratchy wool of a blanket pulled up to your chin. The only light is a sliver of moon through a small, unglazed window. Outside, there are no street lamps, no distant hum of traffic, only the stirring of livestock and the whisper of wind through the thatch of your neighbor's roof. This is a world where your understanding of life, death, and your own body is profoundly different. And frankly, given the state of medieval public health and the complete absence of antibiotics, it's a world you probably won't survive. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel in its own quiet way. And for a bit of fun, post your city or country and the local time in the comments. It's always nice to see where everyone is settling in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your world for tonight is shaped not by science or secular law, but by the grand overarching narrative of the Church. It's the single most powerful institution, a unifier of disparate kingdoms and a provider of cosmic order. Its rhythms dictate your days and seasons. Its bells mark your hours for work and for prayer. And from the moment you are old enough to understand the sermons spoken from the pulpit, you are taught about a clear, non-negotiable spiritual hierarchy. It's a ladder to heaven, and the placement of your soul upon its rungs is of eternal consequence. At the very bottom, in a state of grudging acceptance, is marriage. It is a sacrament, yes, a holy institution designed for the procreation of legitimate children, and as a remedy for human weakness. It's seen as a necessary container for desires that might otherwise run wild and lead to sin. It is good, but it is not the best. Above that is chaste widowhood, to have known the married state and then, upon the death of a spouse, to choose a life of pious celibacy. This is better, a sign of great discipline, a turning away from the world of the flesh and toward the world of the spirit. But at the very pinnacle, second only to the glorious sacrifice of martyrdom, sits virginity, the untouched state. This isn't merely a physical description. It is a profound spiritual status. In your medieval mind, it represents an unbroken vessel, a body and soul wholly dedicated to God, untainted by earthly entanglements. It's a powerful idea, and it is everywhere. You see it in the serene, beatific face of the Virgin Mary, whose statue gazes down from a place of honor in every church. She is the ultimate exemplar, the Queen of Heaven, whose perpetual virginity is not just a footnote to her story, but the very source of her unique holiness. Her womb was the vessel for God made flesh, precisely because it was pure, an enclosed garden, as the theologians like to say, borrowing a phrase from the Song of Solomon. This garden is locked, its contents preserved for God alone. You see this imagery reflected in the art. The lily, a flower so often placed in Mary's hand, is a symbol of this purity. So is the unicorn, that mythical beast said to be so wild and fierce that it could only be tamed by a virgin maiden in whose lap it would gently lay its head. This isn't just a fairy tale to you, it's a story reinforcing a fundamental truth of your universe. Purity has a tangible, mystical power. As you sit in the nave, the cold stone seeping into your legs, you listen to the priest's homily. He tells the stories of the virgin martyrs, young women of the ancient Roman Empire: Agnes, Lucy, Agatha, Catherine. Their tales are held up as the highest examples of female fortitude. They all follow a similar, powerful pattern. A beautiful, devout Christian girl captures the attention of a powerful pagan man. He demands her hand in marriage, an alliance that would mean security, wealth, and worldly status. But she refuses. She declares that she has a greater spouse, a celestial bridegroom, Jesus Christ. This concept of being a sponsor Christi, a bride of Christ, is central to the medieval obsession with virginity. For these saints, And for the nuns who follow in their footsteps, virginity is not an absence of something. It is an active, positive choice. It's a vow that dedicates one's entire being, body, mind, and spirit, to a mystical marriage with the divine. When the pagan suitor, spurned and enraged, subjects the young saint to torment and execution, her virginity becomes her armor and her crown. Her physical body is broken, but her spiritual body, that perfect, untouched vessel, ascends to heaven, glorified. These aren't just grim stories. They are advertisements for the ultimate spiritual path. Look, they say, at what power this state confers. It grants you the strength to defy emperors, to endure unimaginable pain, and to win a martyr's reward. Historians still argue about the degree to which the average person kneeling in that church truly absorbed the fine points of this theology. For the peasant farmer, whose life is a constant cycle of back-breaking labor, birth, and death, these ideals might seem distant, more suited to the cloistered nuns and monks in the abbey on the hill. His daughter's virginity is important, certainly, but perhaps for more practical reasons that we will explore later. Yet the ideal is pervasive. It seeps into the culture, setting a standard against which all women, and to a lesser extent men, are measured. This elevation of the virginal state comes from the most influential thinkers of the early church. Saint Jerome, a man of ferocious intellect and equally ferocious temper, wrote glowingly of virginity as the most fertile state for producing spiritual fruit. It sounds paradoxical, but in his logic, a married woman is distracted. She must focus on her husband, her children, her household. Her energies are divided, spent on worldly things. A virgin, however, can focus her entire being on prayer, contemplation, and God. She is, in a way, more productive for the spiritual health of Christendom. Think of it as the ultimate form of specialization in the great Christian enterprise. The laity populates the earth, while the virgins and celibates dedicate themselves to populating heaven with their prayers. It's a division of labor on a cosmic scale, a sort of heavenly workforce management plan that makes perfect sense to the medieval mind. It's a tidbit you probably wouldn't hear in Sunday school, the idea that a vow of chastity was, in some ways, a commitment to a higher form of spiritual productivity. So you sit there, the scent of incense still hanging in the air, and you understand the world in these terms. A body is not just a body. It's a symbol. It's a story. And its state of purity or impurity has consequences that echo in eternity. The intact body represents integrity, wholeness, and a direct, unmediated connection to the divine. It is a quiet but powerful statement in a loud and chaotic world. The purity paradigm is not just a rule. It is the very atmosphere you breathe. It frames your hopes, your fears, and your understanding of your own place in the great unfolding drama of salvation. You know, the echoes of the priest's sermon fade, but the central idea, that of the pure, unbroken vessel, travels with you as you leave the church. It follows you out of the cool, consecrated stone and back into the sunlight of the material world. But here, in the shadow of a castle, keep rather than a steeple, the idea undergoes a subtle transformation. The focus shifts from the spiritual to the strategic. The vessel of your body is still of paramount importance, but now it is viewed not so much as a container for God's grace, but as an unbreachable family vault. And what it's guarding isn't a mystical connection to the divine, but something far more tangible: power, land, and lineage. For the aristocratic family, your family life is a precarious game of chess, played with provinces and armies. Alliances are the most valuable pieces on the board, and the surest way to seal an alliance is not with a wax-stamped treaty, which can be broken as easily as it was made, but with blood. A marriage. A wedding joins two families, two fortunes, two political interests into a single, vested block. And in this high-stakes merger, a daughter is the most precious currency. You are not simply a person, you are a promise. You are the living seal on a contract that might secure a border, end a generations-long feud, or absorb a rival's territory. peacefully. Your life, therefore, is one of careful, constant curation. You are raised from infancy to be a suitable offering in this political marketplace. You learn to read, perhaps, enough to manage a household account. You learn music, needlepoint, and the intricate dances of the court. But above all, you learn the art of being impeccably, unassailably chaste. You are rarely left alone. A governess, a gaggle of ladies-in-waiting, or a grim-faced elderly aunt is your constant shadow. Your world is a series of enclosed spaces. The walled garden, the women's solar, the private chapel. It's not a prison. Precisely. The accommodations are as luxurious as the age can afford. But it is a gilded cage designed to protect the family's most valuable asset from any hint of scandal or ruin. This is where the economics become brutally clear. When your father negotiates your marriage to the son of a neighboring duke, he is not just finding you a husband. He is making a deal. He agrees to provide a dowry, a substantial payment of money, land, livestock, or valuable goods that will be transferred to the groom's family upon your wedding. This is one of the most significant financial outlays your family will ever make. It is your inheritance, paid up front. In return, the duke's family agrees to a dower, a legal settlement, often a third of the husband's estates, that is promised to you for your financial support should you be widowed. This is a fundamental, well-documented fact of noble medieval life. These weren't just romantic unions, they were massive financial transactions. And your virginity is the absolute, non-negotiable collateral for this entire arrangement. Why? Because the entire structure of aristocratic society, its titles, its land tenure, its very stability, rests upon the principle of legitimate inheritance. The Duke is paying for a political alliance, but he is also banking on an heir who will one day inherit his title, his lands, his wealth, and he must be certain, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that this heir is of his own blood. A bride who is not a virgin introduces a catastrophic risk into this equation. Is the firstborn child truly his, or is it the product of a previous, secret liaison? Any uncertainty undermines the entire foundation of the alliance. His family's legacy could be diverted to a rival's bloodline, all because the vault, the precious vessel, was not secure. The dowry would have been paid under false pretenses. It's the medieval equivalent of investment fraud. This obsession leads to practices that, to our modern sensibilities, seem almost unimaginably intrusive. The pressure is immense. You know that any rumor, any whisper of impropriety, being seen speaking too familiarly with a stable hand, or receiving a gift from a visiting knight, could ruin your value on the marriage market. It could turn you from a prized asset into a family disgrace, possibly to be shuttled off to the nearest convent, taking your useless dowry with you. Your family's honor is, quite literally, embodied in your physical state. In many cases, the obsession with certainty didn't end at the altar. There was the infamous bedding ceremony. After the feast and celebrations, the bride and groom would be escorted to their marriage bed by a crowd of relatives, nobles, and sometimes even the priest. They would be put to bed together, the curtains drawn, while the guests waited outside, drinking and joking. There are few HR policies in the medieval period, but this public-private invasion of privacy would surely have modern heads spinning. Later in the morning, the bedsheets might be inspected for the virginal blood stain, the so-called proof of flowers. If found, it was a cause for public celebration. Its absence was a cause for immediate crisis, potentially leading to the annulment of the marriage and the disgrace of the bride's family. No, historians still argue whether these public bedding and sheet inspection ceremonies were universally practiced, or more of a sensationalized trope. For every documented case, there are likely dozens of marriages where things were handled with more private discretion. The threat of public verification may have been more potent than the act itself, a powerful deterrent hanging over the heads of all young, unmarried nobles. Given these terrifyingly high stakes, it's not surprising that a strange underground market of desperate remedies existed for a young woman who had, through choice or coercion, lost her virginity before marriage. The wedding night loomed as a moment of potential annihilation. This leads to a rather quirky and grim tidbit from the period. The documented tricks to feign virginity, manuals of women's health, and less reputable folk guides offered advice. This might involve using a small sponge saturated with animal blood or concoctions of astringent herbs intended to tighten the muscles. The fact that such remedies were even written about speaks volumes about the crushing pressure and the understanding that a woman's entire future and that of her family hinged on a single biological fact, or at least the successful performance of it. The whole situation gives new meaning to the phrase faking it till you make it. It was less about social climbing and more about social survival. So, as you lie in your carefully guarded bedchamber, you understand. Your purity is not just a matter for God, it is the bedrock of your family's fortune, the key that keeps the vault of your lineage secure. Lying in your bed, you pull the covers a little closer, the weight of these thoughts settling upon you. The church sees your body as a symbol for God. Your father sees it as a bargaining chip for power. But there is a third, more immediate perspective to consider, that of the physician. In your world, the health of your body is not a matter of cells and genes and viruses, but of delicate, precarious, and your virginal state, this intactness you've been taught to guard so fiercely, is considered the foundation of that fragile equilibrium. It is a closed garden of health, a self-contained system humming along in its intended state. To disrupt it is to invite not just social or spiritual chaos, but physical malady. The medical science of your time is built upon the ancient theory of the four humours, an idea inherited from the Greeks and Romans, and codified by the influential physician Galen. You understand this instinctively. It's the common sense of your age. Your body is composed of four essential fluids: blood, which is hot and wet; phlegm, which is cold and wet; yellow bile, which is hot and dry; and black bile, which is cold and dry. Perfect health is nothing more than these four humours existing in perfect balance. Every illness, from a common cough to a deadly fever, is seen as a result of one of these humours becoming excessive or deficient. If you have too much phlegm, you become sluggish and pallid. Too much yellow bile, and you become choleric and irritable. It's an elegant, logical system that explains everything. Within this framework, men and women have fundamentally different constitutions. The male body is considered naturally hot and dry, active, strong, and perfect. The female body, by contrast, is cool and moist, softer, more passive, and considered a less perfect, colder version of the male form. And the virgin body is the ultimate expression of this cool, moist, and, crucially, closed female state. It is stable, because you are a closed garden, remember? Your internal environment is protected. The humours are in their place. Your internal heat and vital moisture conserved. Everything ticking along as nature intended. Sexual intercourse, from this medical perspective, is a profoundly disruptive event for a woman. It literally opens the body, breaking the seal on that contained system. This act is thought to cause a significant loss of heat and moisture, shocking the body and throwing the humours out of whack. A non-virgin woman is considered physically leaky, more porous and vulnerable to external influences and internal imbalances. It's why married women are seen as being more prone to certain illnesses. It's a bit like driving a pristine, brand new carriage off the lot for the first time. The moment it hits a muddy road, it's never going to be perfectly clean again, and it's suddenly susceptible to every rut and puddle. It's a rather pessimistic view of matrimony, as if married life were a slow slide into humoral decay. This belief system creates a strange and powerful paradox. While virginity is held up as the healthiest, most stable state for a young woman, Prolonged virginity can be seen as a source of its own unique and dangerous diseases. The very closeness that makes you healthy can, over time, become a problem. Your body is designed, eventually, to be open through marriage and childbirth. If it remains sealed for too long, the physicians believe things can start to go wrong. The fluids and vapors that are meant to be released have nowhere to go. They begin to build up, stagnate, and putrefact. This is where you get the classic medieval diagnosis known as chlorosis, or green sickness. A young woman becomes lethargic. Her skin takes on a pale greenish tint. Her appetite fades, and she grows melancholic. You might know someone, a cousin perhaps, who has been diagnosed with it. To a modern doctor, her symptoms would scream iron deficiency anemia, a common ailment for young women. But to the medieval physician, the cause is obvious. She is a virgin of marriageable age, whose body is suffering from the retention of menstrual blood and female seed. This retained substance, they believe, corrupts the other humors, producing the sickly green pallor. Even more dramatically, there's the fear of the wandering womb, or suffocation of the mother. This is an ancient idea, going all the way back to the Egyptians. It's one of the quirkiest and most revealing tidbits of medieval medicine. The uterus, the hystera in Greek, which gives us the word hysteria, is not seen as a fixed organ. It is imagined as a distinct, almost animate creature within the female body, one that is desperate for fruition. If it is denied its purpose for too long, it can become light and dry. It may tear loose from its moorings and travel upwards through the body in search of moisture, pressing on other organs. If it reaches the throat, it can cause choking, fainting, and seizures. The cure could be equally strange. Foul-smelling substances might be held to the patient's nose to drive the womb back down, while sweet-smelling perfumes and herbs were applied to her lower regions to entice it to return to its proper place. Historians and medical historians still debate the exact nature of these diagnoses. Was green sickness a purely physiological condition like anemia, just viewed through a humoral lens? Or was there a psychosomatic element, the physical manifestation of the intense social and psychological pressure placed on young women? The very existence of these virgins' diseases created an impossible double bind. You must remain a virgin to be pure, honorable, and valuable. But if you remain a virgin for too long, you risk developing a strange, life-threatening illness. The timing had to be just right. What, then, is the cure for a case of green sickness or a wandering womb? It isn't bloodletting or a special diet, though those might be tried. The primary prescription is maddeningly simple. Get married, and quickly. Regular sexual relations are believed to be the only truly effective therapy, as they will unblock the body, release the retained fluids, and restore the proper humoral balance. The physician is essentially prescribing a wedding night as the definitive medical treatment. It's a doctor's order that aligns perfectly with the social and economic goals of your family, creating a seamless web of belief. The health of your very body seems to cry out for the exact same thing your father's political ambitions demand, and the church grudgingly sanctions: a suitable, timely marriage. It is a powerful confluence of ideas, making the alternative, a life of spinsterhood, seem not just lonely, but a genuine medical risk. And so, the obsession with your body's state continues, no longer just a matter of soul or society, but of your very life and breath, And so, the world seems to have you cornered. Your soul's salvation, your family's fortune, and your body's very health all seem to point in a single, inevitable direction: the marriage bed. It's presented as the cure for all ills, the solution to all problems, the proper and preordained next step in your carefully managed life. But the world you inhabit is rarely so simple. A solution can so easily become the beginning of a new and far more public set of problems. Because once you step out of the enclosed garden of maidenhood and into the legal reality of matrimony, your body doesn't cease to be an object of obsession. It merely becomes subject to a different kind of scrutiny. Its state is no longer a matter of private health or family reputation. It becomes a matter of law, of canon law, and therefore a potent political tool. Let's imagine the worst has happened. The marriage that was meant to solve everything has failed. Perhaps your husband is cruel, or perhaps the promised political alliance has soured. Maybe the son of the duke your father so eagerly allied with turns out to be indifferent or incapable. You are now trapped. Divorce, as you understand it, simply doesn't exist. A true, consummated Christian marriage is a sacrament, a bond tied by God Himself, and what God has joined, no man can put asunder. But the powerful have always found ways. The path isn't divorce, but annulment. It is a legal declaration that, for some specific reason, a valid marriage never actually existed in the first place. It is a wiping clean of the slate, a divine reset button. The reasons for annulment are complex, a tangled thicket of canon law that keeps church lawyers busy and wealthy. The most common reason, a mainstream fact of noble life, is consanguinity, discovering, conveniently, that you and your spouse are too closely related, according to the Church's bewilderingly broad definition of kinship. It's always a useful tool for a king who, after a decade, has grown tired of his queen and has yet to see a male heir. Suddenly, a scribe discovers that their great-grandparents were third cousins, and the whole union is thrown into question. It's a bit of dynastic theater, and everyone with a stake in the outcome watches with bated breath. But another powerful reason for annulment centers directly and publicly on your body, the matter of non-consummation. A marriage, in the eyes of the Church and the law, is only fully and indissolubly forged through the physical act. Until then, it can be set aside. And this is where virginity, or the lack thereof, can be brought out of the private bedchamber and into the cold, public space of an ecclesiastical court. Your husband could accuse you of having been unchaste before the marriage, using this as leverage to end the union. More devastatingly, he could claim that the marriage was never consummated at all, arguing for its dissolution based on impotence, either his or yours, though it was almost always laid at the woman's door. Imagine yourself in that courtroom. It's not a cozy chamber. It's a stone hall, drafty and imposing. You stand before a panel of grim-faced bishops and clerks. The air is thick with the scent of old parchment and judgment. You are the subject of the inquiry, your most intimate history, the topic of open debate. And to prove or disprove the claims, the court could resort to a procedure that represents one of the most uniquely strange tidbits of medieval legal practice, a physical examination by a jury of matrons. This would be a group of older, respected noblewomen or experienced midwives, sworn to objectivity, who would be ordered to take you to a private room. There, they would perform a direct physical examination of your body to determine if you were, in fact, still a virgin, or if you showed the signs of being a true wife. It's an almost unimaginable violation of privacy, a moment where the state, in the form of the Church, claims ultimate authority over the evidence of your own flesh. The testimony of these matrons, delivered in solemn tones back in the courtroom, could seal your fate. It could shatter your reputation, dissolve your marriage, and send you home in disgrace, your dowry lost, your family's honor in tatters. This is the politics of the body in its most raw and invasive form. It's like a terrible medieval reality show, where the season finale is your utter humiliation. Nowhere are the stakes higher than at the royal level. For a king, a queen's virginity at marriage and her subsequent fertility are not private matters at all. They are affairs of state. An entire kingdom's stability rests on a clear line of succession. Let's say a king marries a foreign princess to secure peace with a rival nation. Her purity upon arrival is a symbol of her nation's good faith. Her ability to produce a male heir is the fulfillment of the contract. If she fails, the whispers begin. The physicians cluck their tongues about her humoral balance. The courtiers start speculating, and the king, glancing toward the pretty young daughter of a new, ambitious duke, might begin to have his lawyers pore over those old genealogy charts. Historians debate whether these public annulment cases, which hinged on claims of impotence or non-consummation, were driven by genuine theological belief about the sacrament of marriage, or were simply cynical legal maneuvers. A convenient, church-approved loophole for the powerful to escape unwanted unions. Whichever the case, the result was the same. A woman's body became the battleground. Think of Eleanor of Aquitaine and King Louis VII of France. Their 15-year marriage produced 2 daughters but no sons. The alliance was crumbling. Officially, their marriage was annulled on the grounds of consanguinity, but the whole of Europe knew the real reason. Louis needed a new wife who might give him an heir to secure his dynasty. Eleanor's failure to produce a son transformed her from a queen into a political liability. Her body had failed to fulfill its most vital political function. The annulment didn't just end a marriage, it redrew the political map of Europe. So you see how the ripples spread outward. An idea born in the minds of theologians, the pure virginal vessel, becomes an economic guarantee for your family, a medical diagnostic for your physician, and finally, a potent weapon in the arsenals of kings and popes. Your body is not your own. It is a document to be read, a proof to be examined, and a piece of political capital to be spent with or without your consent. It is the silent, breathing heart of a game far larger and more ruthless than you can fully comprehend. You feel the weight of that royal courtroom, the cold stares of the bishops, the crushing force of law and politics laid bare. It is a terrifying, impersonal machine, and it is easy to imagine that this was the totality of medieval existence, a world governed by an inescapable and iron-willed obsession. But now, just for a moment, let that imposing image dissolve. Let the stone walls of the ecclesiastical court fade away. Zoom out from the throne room, past the high castle walls, beyond the burgeoning towns with their guild halls, and travel out along a muddy, rutted track into the vast agricultural heartland. Here, amongst the thatch and timber of a small village, the grand, obsessive ideal meets a much messier, more flexible, and ultimately more human reality. Here, you are not a duke's daughter. You are a farmer's daughter. Your world is not defined by tapestry-hung solas, but by the planting season and the harvest, by the communal rhythm of the village. The great political maneuverings of kings and popes are distant rumors, stories told by a traveling friar or a merchant passing through, as remote and fantastical as the tales of fire-breathing dragons. But the obsession with your purity has trickled down, seeping into the very soil of this place. It's just different here. Your virginity is still valuable, but its currency has changed. It isn't collateral for a province, it's the guarantee of a decent match within your own community. It secures a marriage to a boy with a good strip of land, a strong back for plowing, and a sober head. Your dowry isn't a chest of silver coins, but perhaps a healthy cow, a few geese, and a new set of pots. The stakes are smaller, but to you, they are your entire world. The church's teaching is just as present. The same village priest preaches the same sermons about the holiness of the Virgin Mary and the sinful weakness of the flesh. But here on the ground, doctrine often bent to the realities of life. A fundamental part of your life is the slow, informal process of courtship that happens at church ales, feast days, and during the long hours of communal labor in the fields. And within this courtship, a crucial distinction existed, one that created a very large and significant gray area, the difference between a promise to marry and the wedding itself. This is the well-documented world of spousals. A couple could exchange vows de futuro for the future. This was essentially an engagement, a promise to wed. A more binding version was a vow de presenti, for the present, where a couple exchanged promises in the present tense, "I take you as my husband," which the church held to be a legally binding, if irregular, marriage, even without a priest or witnesses. With these promises hanging in the air, a young couple might feel themselves to be, for all intents and purposes, married in the eyes of God, if not yet in the eyes of the village, and sometimes they would act accordingly. Sex that occurred after a promise of future marriage was still technically the sin of fornication, but within the community it was often viewed with a more forgiving eye. It was seen less as a transgression and more as an anticipation of a union that everyone knew was going to happen anyway. Fight! Of course, this gray area had a very real potential consequence. A baby, a pregnancy before the official church wedding, was the ultimate proof that the informal promises had been consummated. It blew the lid off any quiet understanding and forced the matter into the open. Far from being a catastrophic disaster that would see you cast out, this situation more often acted as a powerful social glue. The evidence of a coming child would put immense pressure on the couple and their families to formalize the union immediately. The priest would grumble, a penance would be assigned, but a wedding would happen. Society, at its most practical level, preferred a slightly premature but legitimate heir to an unsupported single mother. And a bastard child who would be a burden on the parish. Historians continue to debate just how much daylight existed between the rigid pronouncements of canon law and the accepted practices within tight-knit rural communities. For every stern sermon condemning premarital relations, there are court records and parish registers that hint at a more pragmatic approach, one built around ensuring social stability rather than policing private behavior to an impossible standard. The messy reality was simply that young people fell in love or lust, and that communities found ways to absorb these very human events into the social fabric. This isn't to say there were no consequences. If a boy made a promise and then tried to back out, especially if the girl was pregnant, he could find himself in a world of trouble, not just from her enraged father and brothers, but from the community as a whole. And for couples caught in a liaison with no promise of marriage, public shame was a powerful tool of enforcement. This is where we find a rather quirky tidbit of local justice. Instead of a high court, you faced village justice. You might be forced to stand in front of the church congregation on Sunday, wrapped in a white sheet to symbolize your impurity, and publicly confess your sin. Or, in some places, you could be subjected to a skimmington, a raucous, mocking parade where villagers would bang pots and pans while parading effigies of the offending couple through the streets. It's like being publicly shamed on the world's meanest, most low-tech social media platform. It was brutal, but its goal was to reinforce community standards and bring the offenders back into line. And then there was the city. In the growing towns, with their more anonymous populations, you find the most glaring contradiction of all: the licensed, regulate. Officially, the church condemned prostitution as a grave sin. Unofficially, secular and even church authorities understood that male desire, particularly among unmarried apprentices, soldiers, and traveling merchants, was not going to simply disappear, and so they adopted a pragmatic, if deeply hypocritical, stance. They created a safety valve. Brothels were often confined to a specific street, subject to rules, and taxed. This allowed the city fathers to contain, control, and, bizarrely, to profit from the very behavior they publicly condemned. The great theologian St. Augustine famously made the argument himself, comparing prostitutes to a sewer in a palace, filthy and vile, yes, but necessary to carry away the waste so that the respectable parts of the house could remain clean. In a world so obsessed with the purity of its good women, there had to be a designated space for impurity. And so, as you lie here, safe in your own time, you can see the whole, vast, contradictory picture. The medieval obsession with virginity wasn't a single, simple thing. It was a cathedral of ideas, built by many hands for many reasons. Its foundations were theological, a vision of the pure soul dedicated to God. Its great pillars were economic and political, shaping the fortunes of families and kingdoms. Its arches were vaulted with a strange and mistaken science that linked the soul's purity to the body's health. But deep in the crypt and scattered through the pews lived the real people, people who loved and feared and made mistakes, people for whom these grand ideas were a source of real pressure, real pain, and sometimes a reality they simply chose to bend. They lived in the messy, human space between the impossible ideal and the undeniable truths of their own bodies. So as you drift off, let those complex histories settle. They are not just stories of rules and transgressions, but of human beings navigating a world of profound belief and equally profound contradiction. The calming rituals of a traditional Japanese tea ceremony. You can feel the faint phantom buzz in your pocket, an echo of the notifications that have, for weeks, felt like a permanent extension of your nervous system. Out there, beyond the simple bamboo gate you just passed through, lies a world of deadlines, of overflowing inboxes, and of that nagging feeling you've forgotten something critically important. But as the gate clicks softly shut, a different world begins to unfold before you, one measured not in minutes and seconds, but in the rhythm of your own breath. You stand at the head of a path, the Roji, a name that translates to the dewy ground. It is a fitting title. The air here hangs cool and moist, carrying the scent of damp earth, of moss clinging to ancient stones, and the deep, patient perfume of evergreen. It feels like the world has just been rinsed clean. The path isn't a straightforward pavement leading to a destination. That would be far too efficient for what is happening here. Instead, it's a trail of intentionally uneven stepping stones, called tobi ishi. Each one is placed with immense care, not in a straight line, but in a gentle, meandering arrangement that forces you to be present. You can't stride confidently while mentally composing your next work email. You must look down. You must consider each step, your balance, your placement, your connection to the earth beneath your feet. It's a beautifully simple, almost comically effective way of tricking your busy mind into a state of mindfulness. It's difficult to ruminate on geopolitical anxieties when you are actively trying not to face plant into a patch of perfectly manicured moss. Your focus narrows from the sprawling chaos of your life to the few square inches of stone where your foot will land next. One step, and then the next. The garden that surrounds you is a masterclass in subtlety. There are no loud, ostentatious bursts of color here, no beds of prize-winning roses or dazzling sunflowers vying for your attention. The palette is 1,000 shades of green, dappled with the gentle, shifting light that filters through the leaves of maple and pine. The purpose of the Roji isn't to impress you with horticultural skill, but to quiet your spirit. It's a landscape designed to be absorbed, not just observed. The eye rests easily on the soft contours of the moss, the stoic silence of a granite lantern, the gentle sway of a fern. Everything is as it should be, humble and in its place. This profound emphasis on rustic simplicity wasn't always the way. In the Shuwuth and Shuluk centuries, the ruling elites of Japan often favored opulent tea gatherings, using priceless utensils imported from China in grand, lavishly decorated rooms. But one man, the legendary tea master Senno Rikyu, guided the ceremony down a different path. He championed a philosophy known as wabi-sabi, an appreciation for the imperfect, the impermanent, and the humble. He believed that the true spirit of tea was to be found in tranquility and a deep connection with nature, not in a display of wealth. It was Rikyu who standardized the Roji as an essential prelude to the ceremony, Warol, turning this garden walk into the first crucial step of spiritual cleansing. He wanted guests to literally walk away from the gilded, dusty world and enter a space of pure, unadorned presence. You continue your slow, deliberate walk, the only sounds being the scuff of your shoe on stone. and the distant call of a bird you can't name. As you adjust to the quiet, you start to notice the finer details. You see how the path itself has been recently sprinkled with water, a practice known as uchimizu. This isn't just for cleaning, it's an act of hospitality, done to give the stones and leaves a fresh, vibrant luster as though a gentle rain has just passed. It deepens the colors and cools the air, suggesting purity and a world newly washed. It's an ephemeral touch, a gesture that will last only for a little while, reminding you of the fleeting beauty of the present moment. A modern sprinkler system, with its violent, rhythmic chak, ch, chik, could never achieve this same poetic grace. It would likely just blast a garden gnome into a nearby koi pond. Here, the water is a whisper, not a shout. The design of such a space is, paradoxically, an incredibly complex art form. You pass a stone lantern, its surface softened by a patina of lichen. It's not just a light source, it's a sculpture, an anchor point in the sea of green. Its placement, just so, might be intended to draw your eye towards a particularly beautiful maple branch or to cast a certain quality of shadow as evening falls. There are no accidents here. This brings to mind a subtle and fascinating debate. Historians still argue whether the extreme simplicity championed by Rikyū and other tea masters was purely a philosophical statement of wabi-sabi, or if it was also a clever, subversive rejection of the flashy, gold-gilded culture of the era's powerful shoguns. Was this quiet garden a humble retreat, or a silent, dignified protest against the excesses of the powerful? Perhaps it was both, a space that offered spiritual solace to the individual, while subtly challenging the values of the world outside its walls. As you near the end of the path, you get your first glimpse of the tea house, the chashitsu. It is small, almost shockingly so, tucked behind a thicket of bamboo. It seems to grow out of the earth itself. The walls are made of a simple earthen plaster, and the roof of humble thatch. It has none of the grandeur of a temple or the imposing presence of a fortress. It looks from this distance quieter and more unassuming than almost any building you have ever seen. You could almost imagine it being a gardener's forgotten shed, were it not for the palpable sense of intention that radiates from it. It looks much smaller than your first apartment, and yet it somehow possesses infinitely more grace and purpose. It promises nothing but stillness. The garden has done its work. The phantom buzzing in your pocket has faded, replaced by the gentle hum of the living world around you. Your thoughts have slowed from a frantic torrent to a calm, clear stream. You have arrived not just at a place, but at a state of mind ready for the next quiet stage of the ritual that awaits. Before you approach the tea house itself, your eye is drawn to a small, roofed waiting bench just off the path. The Koshikake Machiai. This is a place for a final pause, a last moment of quiet contemplation before the ceremony begins. It is the final buffer zone between your worldly life and the sanctified space of the tea room. Sitting for a moment on the simple wooden bench, you let the last remnants of your mental checklist for tomorrow simply drift away, dissolving into the quiet hum of the garden. You aren't waiting for a late host. This pause is for you. It's a purposefully designed moment of nothingness, an act of clearing your mind's cache before you proceed. The silence is profound, punctuated only by the gentle sound of water you can now hear from a source still hidden from view. Rising from the bench, you take the last few steps on the Roji path, which leads you to a low stone basin known as a tsukubai. This is the source of the soft trickling sound. Water, clear and cool, flows steadily from a bamboo pipe into the hollow of the stone. Next to it rests a simple bamboo ladle. This is not for drinking. This is for a ritual of purification. To use it, you must bend down low, almost into a full crouch. This humble posture is no accident. In fact, the very name tsukubai comes from the verb tsukubao, meaning to crouch or to stoop. It physically forces you into a position of humility before you even touch the water. There is no standing tall and proud here. You pick up the long-handled ladle, its bamboo smooth and cool against your palm. You scoop up the clear water. First, you pour a little over your left hand, then your right, washing away the symbolic dust of the outside world. Then, you pour a small amount into the cup of your left hand and rinse your mouth, being careful to do so discreetly. You must not touch the ladle directly to your lips. The act is symbolic, a purification of your speech. You spit the water out gently onto the stones below the basin, not back into it. Finally, you hold the ladle vertically, allowing the remaining water to trickle down the handle, cleansing it for the next person. The whole sequence is silent, prescribed, and deeply calming. You haven't just washed your hands, you've performed a small, deliberate ritual that has prepared you for what comes next. And what comes next is perhaps the most famous and most peculiar feature of a traditional tea house: the entrance. It's called the Nijiriguchi, and it is less of a door and more of a small, square hatch. It's typically only about 2 feet high. To enter, you must get on your hands and knees and crawl. There is no elegant way to do this. You simply must humble yourself, set aside your dignity, and wiggle through. In our modern world, it feels faintly absurd, like trying to get into the back seat of a 2-door coupe that is already full of groceries. But its purpose is profound. Back in feudal Japan, this was the great equalizer. Even the most powerful and feared samurai, bristling with arrogance and authority, had to perform this act of humility. Practically, he had to remove his long swords, the very symbols of his status, and his power to inflict violence, and leave them on a rack outside. They simply would not fit through the opening. By crawling through the Nijiriguchi, everyone, regardless of rank, wealth, or power, entered the tea room as an equal. You duck your head and awkwardly shuffle through the small opening, emerging into the soft dimness of the chashitsu. The air inside is still and thick with the clean, grassy scent of tatami mats underfoot and the faint, sweet perfume of sandalwood from a single stick of incense you cannot yet see. The room is tiny, perhaps only 4.5 mats in size, a standard intimate configuration. The light is subdued, filtered through paper screens, or shoji, eliminating all glare and creating a space of soft shadows and gentle gradations of light. The walls are a quiet, neutral clay, their texture subtly uneven, designed to catch the light in interesting ways. The effect is womb-like, a space designed to quiet the senses, not overwhelm them. It's the ultimate expression of minimalist design. Centuries before the concept ever had a name, it makes you reconsider all the clutter you have in your own home, suddenly feeling the urge to replace it all with a single, artfully placed twig. Scholars sometimes wonder if the Nijiriguchi entrance served a dual purpose. While its philosophical role as an equalizer is well documented, some historians posit it could also have been a clever, if subtle, secure. A low, narrow entrance makes it incredibly difficult for an attacker to charge into the room quickly and draw a weapon. Was this just a happy coincidence? Or was it a conscious design choice by tea masters who often had to navigate the dangerous and paranoid world of warring lords? It's likely the primary purpose was indeed philosophical, but in a time of constant conflict, the added security probably wasn't an unwelcome side effect. As your eyes adjust, they are drawn to the one focal point of decoration in the room, the alcove, or tokonoma. This is not a shelf cluttered with curios. In its center hangs a simple scroll, a kakejiku, bearing a line of calligraphy. The characters are fluid, brushed with confidence and grace. They might be a line of poetry or a Zen phrase intended to evoke a particular season or feeling. Below the scroll, in a simple ceramic or bamboo vase, is a single flower arrangement known as a chabana. It is not a grand bouquet. It might be a single, perfect camellia or a sprig of a wild plant, its leaves still holding a hint of the garden's dew. The flower is chosen to appear as it would in nature, wild and unforced. The host has selected these two items, the scroll and the flower, with immense care to set the theme for today's gathering. Everything in the tokonoma is temporary, here for this one day, for this one meeting, never to be repeated in exactly the same way again. You take your seat on the tatami, folding your legs in the formal seiza position. The silence in the room deepens, but it isn't an empty silence. You become aware of the gentle sound that has been in the background all along. The sound of water heating in a heavy iron kettle, the kama, which is nestled in a small, square sunken hearth cut into the mat. The lid of the kettle is slightly ajar, and the sound it makes is not a boisterous boil or a shrill whistle. It is a soft, sighing sound, a low hum that the Japanese poetically describe as matsukaze, the wind in the pines. It is the only sound in the universe right now. It is the heartbeat of the room. You sit in the quiet, empty space, listening to the wind in the pines, waiting for your host to enter. The journey is complete. The world has been left behind. The ceremony is about to begin. The only sound in the world is the soft song of the iron kettle, the wind whispering through the pines. You have been sitting in the quiet of the room for several moments, but it feels both like an eternity and no time at all. Then, without a sound, the paper screen door slides open. Your host kneels in the opening, places the items they are carrying onto the tatami floor just inside the room, and then slides the door closed again. There is no greeting, no hello, sorry to keep you. The ceremony of communication has already begun, and for now, it is entirely non-verbal. The host moves with a deliberate, unhurried grace that is mesmerizing to watch. Every motion is practiced, yet feels entirely natural, flowing like water. The host arranges the primary utensils for making the tea. There is the tea bowl, the chawan, an earthenware vessel that is substantial enough to be held with two hands. It isn't perfectly symmetrical. You can see the slight imperfections, the artist's touch in its glaze. Next to it sits a small, often lacquerware container. This is the nasume, the caddy that holds the powdered green tea. There's a long, slender bamboo scoop, the chashaku, resting across its top. And finally, a bamboo whisk, the chazan, its fine tines exquisitely cut from a single piece of bamboo, looking like a delicate, half-bloomed flower. These objects, the dogu, are not just tools. They are revered participants in the ceremony, each with its own history and character. The host begins the preparation, a sequence of movements known as the teme, and the first part of this sequence is not making tea, but cleaning. The host retrieves a silk cloth, the fukusa, which was tucked into their belt, or obi. What happens next is a small, quiet miracle of dexterity and focus. The host folds the fukusa. This isn't like folding a napkin for a dinner party. It is a precise, prescribed ritual of folding and unfolding, turning the cloth in their hands, creating sharp creases, examining it, and refolding it. It's a silent, ballet-ic performance for an audience of one. If you were to try this at home, you'd likely end up with something resembling a crumpled tissue after a particularly emotional movie. Here, in the host's hands, it becomes an act of meditation, a physical manifestation of clearing the mind and focusing intention. Once the fukusa is properly folded, the host uses it to symbolically purify the tea caddy, wiping the lid with a slow, deliberate stroke. Then, the tea scoop is cleaned in the same manner. The movements are so exact, so devoid of any wasted motion, that they seem to hold a significance far beyond their practical purpose. Historians still argue whether every single gesture in the teme holds a specific, layered symbolic meaning, or if some are simply the result of generations of tea masters, refining the most efficient, graceful way to accomplish a task within the confined ergonomics of the tiny tea room. Perhaps the truth is that a gesture performed with absolute efficiency and grace naturally accumulates its own meaning. Now for the tea bowl. The host uses a bamboo ladle, the hishaku, to take hot water from the kettle. They pour a small amount into the chawan, then place the whisk inside. They inspect the whisk, checking its delicate tines for any breaks, and simultaneously soften them in the warm water, while also warming the bowl itself. This practical act is done with the same meditative attention as everything else. After a moment, the host discards the water into a wastewater receptacle, the kensui, and then wipes the bowl with a different cloth, a bleached linen cloth called a chakin. The bowl is now warm, clean, and ready. Watching this process, you realize this is the opposite of your morning routine, where you might blast your travel mug with a spray of hot water while simultaneously trying to find matching socks. This is a ceremony of single tasking. Some of the tea utensils used in these ceremonies are astonishingly valuable. While Senno Rikyu famously championed the use of simple, rustic wares, sometimes ones he even made himself, for the tradition also venerates pieces made by master craftsmen hundreds of years ago. A humble-looking tea bowl might have a name, a lineage, and a provenance that could fill a small book. Tiny imperfection, a crack repaired with gold lacquer, a technique called kintsugi, is not seen as a flaw, but as part of its unique story, making it even more precious. It's a beautiful concept. This idea that an object becomes more worthy of love, not despite its breaks, but because of them. The host now picks up the tea scoop and the caddy with 3.5 delicate scoops. They measure a precise amount of bright green matcha powder from the natsume and place it into the center of the warm, dry bowl. The quantity seems impossibly small. This leads to a curious tidbit of tea lore. The tea scoop, the chashaku, is traditionally carved from a single piece of bamboo, often by the tea master himself. Before being used, it is given a poetic name, a mei. This name is often evocative of a Zen thought, a line of poetry, or a natural image. Imagine your host using a scoop named Moonlight on a single leaf, or First Heron of Winter. It imbues a simple bamboo stick with a soul. It's certainly a more romantic name than tablespoon. Having measured the tea, the host returns the scoop and caddy to their original positions. Now, for the water, the host once again takes up the long bamboo ladle. This is a moment of pure poise. They dip it into the iron kettle, filling it with hot water, taking care not to let any stray drips mar the tatami mat. As they draw it out, they pause for a fraction of a second over the kettle, a gesture of absolute control, before moving it smoothly over to the tea bowl. They pour about 1/3 of the ladle's contents over the powder, and then return the rest of the water to the kettle in a single, fluid motion. The sound the returning water makes as it rejoins the water in the kettle is called tsuyu, or dew, another of the many quiet sounds celebrated in the tea room. The host turns the bowl with practiced, reverent care, so its most beautiful side, its front, is facing you. They pick it up and place it on the tatami mat before you, in the space between you and them, a silent offering. You then perform a bow, a deep acknowledgement of the host's work and intention. The host bows in return. This is the simple, profound choreography of giving and receiving. You place your right hand on the mat, then your left, leaning forward from the waist. The silence in the room feels heavier now, charged with respect and anticipation. It's a silence that isn't empty, but full. You reach for the bowl. First, with your right hand, you place it on the tatami just in front of you. Then, you place your left palm flat on the mat and execute a second, smaller bowl, an expression of gratitude for the tea. Finally, you pick up the bowl, placing your right hand along its side and cupping your left hand underneath to support its weight. It is warm, a comforting, living heat that seems to pulse gently against your palms. The earthy texture of the ceramic feels solid and grounding. For a moment, you just hold it, appreciating its weight, its warmth, its simple, unadorned beauty. This bowl is not a disposable cup to be drained and forgotten. It is the center of this universe. Now, a gesture of profound humility. Before you bring the bowl to your lips, you raise it slightly, as a sign of respect to the host and the tea. Then, using your right hand, you rotate the bowl about a quarter, turn clockwise in the palm of your left hand. You do this so that you do not drink directly from its designated front, from its most aesthetically pleasing angle. This small rotation is an act of modesty, a way of saying you are not worthy of drinking from the bowl's best feature. It's a beautifully subtle piece of etiquette. If this were a burger, it would be like making a point to take your first bite from the slightly less photogenic back corner rather than the heroically stacked front. It is an acknowledgement that you are a guest in the presence of something special. You lift the bowl and bring it towards your face. The clean, vegetal aroma rises to meet you. A scent somewhere between fresh-cut grass, steamed spinach, and something uniquely sweet and oceanic. You take your first sip. The flavor is unlike any other tea. It is not delicate or thin. It is rich, complex, and powerful. There is an initial, deep bitterness, a sophisticated, pleasing bitterness, not a harsh one, that quickly blossoms into a profound, savory quality known as umami. This is followed by a lingering, almost creamy sweetness that coats your entire mouth. This unique profile comes from how matcha is produced. Unlike other green teas, whose leaves are simply steeped, matcha is made from tea leaves that are shade-grown for several weeks before harvest. This process boosts their chlorophyll and amino acid content, resulting in that vibrant green color and intense, full-bodied flavor. Before the leaves are steamed, dried, and ground into a microscopic fine powder, you are not just drinking an infusion, you are consuming the entire leaf. This practice traces its roots back to Buddhist monks in the Zhou Earth century, who were the first to popularize the grinding of tea leaves. They found the drink had a unique quality. The torse, because its high concentration of caffeine provided alertness and focus, but another compound, L-theanine, simultaneously induced a state of calm, meditative relaxation. It was, in effect, the perfect beverage for long hours of silent meditation, a way to stay awake without the jittery anxiety. It wasn't just a refreshment, it was a tool for enlightenment. You take 2 more sips, savoring the universe of flavor in the bowl. As you prepare to take your final sip, you are expected to make a soft, audible slurp. In almost any other context, this would be considered a breach of etiquette. But here, in the refined quiet of the chishitsu, the slurp is a necessary and welcome sound. It is the signal to the host that you have finished and that you have thoroughly enjoyed the tea. It is a sign of deep appreciation. So you slurp, gently but deliberately. The sound hangs in the air for a moment, the only punctuation in a long, silent sentence. You then lower the bowl and, using your thumb and forefinger, gently wipe the rim where your lips touched. Juxtaposition. You then turn the bowl counterclockwise back to its original position, so its beautiful front is once again facing the host. You place it back on the mat where you first picked it up. The act of receiving and drinking is complete. Now, a profound stillness settles, a shared silence between you and your host. There is no need for conversation, no discussion of the weather or small talk about your journey. The connection has already been made through the shared ritual, through the focus on this one bowl of tea. It's an expression of a core Japanese aesthetic concept, ichigo ichi, one time, one meeting. This exact gathering, with this host, in this room, with this specific bowl and scroll, at this particular time of day, will never happen again. It is a unique and precious moment, and the silence allows you to simply exist within it. Historians and philosophers, of course, still debate the true achievability of this perfect ideal. Can a human mind, always cluttered with memory and anticipation, ever be truly, completely present for that one meeting? Or is Ichigo Ichi a guiding star, a perfection we can only ever strive for? After you have admired the finished bowl, the host asks if you would like to inspect some of the other utensils. This is the moment when the formal ceremony softens slightly. The host cleans the tea scoop and the lacquer tea caddy and places them for you to view. You can pick them up, feel their texture, Admire the craftsmanship of the artist who made them, and perhaps inquire about their poetic name. It is a quiet, intimate denouement. When the last item has been admired, and the host has cleaned and removed the final utensils, it is over. The host slides open the screen door and gives a final bow. You return it. The exchange is complete, and now you must leave this womb of tranquility. You turn toward the tiny Nijiraguchi. Remember crawling through that humbling little hole, and awkwardly maneuver your way back out into the light of the garden. You pause to put on your shoes and your swords. Metaphorically speaking, you have returned to yourself, to your status, to your worldly concerns. But something has shifted. As you walk back along the roji, the stepping stones feel more familiar now. The light filtering through the maple leaves seems somehow softer. The quiet you cultivated inside the tea room has followed you out. The phantom buzzing in your pocket might return. The deadlines still exist, but they have been put in their proper place. They are just a small part of your world, not its entirety. You walked into this garden seeking a moment of peace, and you leave carrying that peace within you, a silent, fragrant, emerald green stillness you can return to in your mind, long after you have left the dewy ground behind. Curious courtship etiquette in the Elizabethan era, King. The world you wake up in smells of wood smoke and damp wool. Outside your leaded window, the sounds aren't of traffic, but of cartwheels groaning on cobblestones, and the distant, rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer. It's the late Juluk century, and the air itself feels different, thicker, earthier, and filled with a sense of prescribed order. Your path in life is not a sprawling map of infinite possibilities, but a rather narrow, well-trodden lane, and the most significant turning on that lane, the one that will determine almost everything about your future, is marriage. But the thoughts you have about this are not of starlit balconies or a dizzying, all-consuming passion. Such notions are the stuff of foolish plays and idle poetry. For you, and for everyone in your station, marriage is, first and foremost, a business. You are a valuable asset. That might sound a little cold, a little transactional, but it's the fundamental truth of your existence. You represent an alliance, a joining of names, lands, and fortunes. Your future spouse is not someone you will discover in a moment of serendipity, but someone you will acquire through a painstaking process of negotiation. It's a merger and acquisition, and you are both the prize and the principal negotiator, or rather, the person for whom the negotiations are being conducted. Your heart, that flighty, unreliable muscle, is a very junior partner in this enterprise. Your father, your guardian, perhaps even a well-connected uncle, is the CEO, steering the ship with a firm hand on the tiller of pragmatism. The process begins not with a glance across a crowded room, but with quiet conversations in oak-paneled studies between men. And your family has a certain standing, a certain amount of property, and a reputation they have been carefully cultivating for generations. The goal is to marry up, or at the very least, marry sideways to consolidate power. A potential match is evaluated like a prize saw at a country fair. What is their family's annual income? How many acres do they hold? Are they in favor at court? Or are they inconveniently on the wrong side of the ever-shifting religious divide? Are there any embarrassing skeletons in their family closet? A hint of madness, a whisper of debt, a great-aunt with a fondness for conversing with badgers. Any of these could sour the deal instantly. It's a far more rigorous background check than anything we could conceive of today, conducted not through databases, but through a shrewd network of gossip and inquiry. It's like checking someone's social media, except you do it by sending a trusted servant to the market to listen to what the butcher's wife is saying about the family's finances. Of course, in the eyes of the church, the consent of both individuals was a mainstream requirement for a legitimate marriage. You could not, legally, be forced to the altar against your will. However, The sheer weight of family expectation and filial duty made outright refusal a monumental, life-altering act of defiance. Imagine the pressure, your entire family's future prosperity, your siblings' prospects, your parents' legacy, all of it could hinge on you. Simply saying yes to a person you've perhaps met once, for 5 very stiff and chaperoned minutes. Declining would be less like breaking an engagement and more like scuttling a major corporate merger because you didn't like the color of the other company's logo. Once a promising candidate has been identified and the initial overtures between families have been made, a more peculiar phase of investigation might begin. While your father is poring over land deeds, your mother might be engaging in some due diligence of her own, albeit of a more mystical nature. This is an age where science and superstition are happily married. It would not be at all strange for a family to consult a cunning man or an astrologer to have the horoscopes of the potential couple drawn up and compared. Were your stars auspiciously aligned? Did the heavens bless this union? A bad cosmic forecast could be just as damaging as a bad credit rating. Wonderfully strange thought, your entire romantic future being decided because Mars was in a grumpy alignment with Saturn on your intended's birthday. Let's say the ledgers look good and the stars are in your favor. A first meeting might be arranged. It is not a date. You will not be going for a quiet walk to get to know each other. You will be put on display, likely at a family dinner or a larger social gathering. Your task is simple. Do not be weird. Demonstrate your good breeding. If you are a young woman, you will show off your accomplishments, your modest deportment, your skill at playing the lute, your needlework. If you are a young man, you will show your wit, your knowledge of courtly manners, your ability to hold your liquor without getting into a theological argument with your prospective father-in-law. The conversation would be stilted, public, and peppered with platitudes, all while your relatives watch you with the intensity of hawk-eyed auditors. It has all the relaxed, natural charm of a job interview panel that's taken place in the middle of a family holiday. This formal, rigid structure leads to a question that historians still argue about today. To what degree did personal affection actually factor into these arrangements? Were young Elizabethans simply resigned to their fate as dutiful pawns in a dynastic game, or was there a hidden world of genuine feeling bubbling just beneath the surface? The sheer volume of love poetry from the era suggests that romance was far from dead, but was this a reflection of reality or an elaborate, stylized fantasy? We may never know for certain how much these carefully constructed courtships were secretly animated by real attraction, or how many were simply endured with quiet, stoic resignation. As the negotiations progress, the communication remains primarily between the heads of the families. Letters are exchanged, but they are not filled with breathless endearments. They are filled with clauses and conditions. The dowry, the money, goods, and property the bride brings to the marriage, is hashed out in excruciating detail. For the gentry and nobility, this could be a fortune. The groom's family, in turn, would have to agree to a jointure, a portion of the husband's estate that would be settled on his wife for her support, should she be widowed. These legal documents, the prenuptials of their day, were the real love letters of the upper class. The haggling could be more intense than trying to buy a used horse, with both sides wanting to secure the best possible deal. It is only after these papers are drawn up and all parties are satisfied, when the ink on the contract is dry, that you are formally given permission to proceed to the next stage. Only now, with the business settled, can the strange and wonderful performance of courtship truly begin. The ink has dried on the contracts. The fathers have shaken hands, the mothers have exchanged knowing, satisfied glances, and the astrologer has been paid his fee. The merger, as we established, is a go. But now begins the part of the process that has very little to do with finances and everything to do with performance. You must now act as though this whole affair was born not of pragmatism, but of a deep and sudden love. It's time for the art of courtship a highly stylized, deeply theatrical pageant in which you and your intended are the star players, and your entire social circle is the audience. The goal is no longer to secure a good deal. The goal is to convince everyone, including perhaps yourselves, that this incredibly sensible arrangement is also a passionate affair of the heart. Every interaction you have is now public. Privacy is a luxury you cannot afford, and a concept that barely exists. Should you wish to spend time with your future spouse, you will do so under the ever-present, watchful eye of a chaperone. This is usually an older female relative, a widow aunt, a long-suffering governess, or perhaps your mother herself. 4. This individual's sole purpose is to act as a human buffer zone, ensuring that no improper words, glances, or, heaven forbid, touches are exchanged. The chaperone is a permanent fixture, sitting quietly in the corner of the room, her knitting needles clicking with a relentless metronomic rhythm. She is the human equivalent of a firewall, silently blocking any attempts at genuine, unscripted intimacy. Trying to have a private conversation would be like trying to share a secret in a library where the librarian has hearing like a bat. Under these sterile conditions, direct communication is impossible. You cannot simply ask your betrothed about their day or their dreams. Such blatant conversation would be uncouth. Instead, you must resort to a far more elegant and infinitely more complicated form of expression. You must become a poet. This is the great age of the sonnet. Thanks to writers like Sir Philip Sidney and a promising upstart from Stratford-upon-Avon, penning love poems has become the ultimate sign of a refined and passionate suitor. So, you sit at your writing desk with a flickering candle and a freshly sharpened quill, ready to compose a masterpiece. The problem is, your feelings are not yet the stuff of high art. You're supposed to be wrestling with the torment of unrequited love. But what you're really wrestling with is finding a word that rhymes with your jointure. The poetry you write is not really about your feelings. It's about your mastery of the form of feelings. You'll borrow heavily from established conventions. Your beloved's eyes are not just brown, they are luminous orbs that outshines the stars. Her cheeks are not merely rosy, they are gardens where lilies and roses vie for supremacy. Her voice is not pleasant, it is the music of the spheres. It's a game of intricate metaphors and classical allusions. You spend hours comparing your love to the trials of legendary heroes, even though the greatest trial you've faced so far is trying to look dignified while riding a horse through a muddy lane. It's less about bearing your soul and more about showing off your excellent classical education. These sonnets, once completed and painstakingly copied onto fine paper, are delivered as gifts, and the gifts don't stop there. This stage of courtship is a constant exchange of symbolic tokens. A young man might present his intended with a pair of fine leather gloves. This isn't just a practical way to keep her hands warm, it's a gesture laden with meaning. A glove represents the hand, and by extension, the person. To accept the gloves is to symbolically accept the man's hand and his protection. You might also give her an ornate handkerchief, embroidered with your initials. In a world with less than ideal sanitation, a handkerchief was a useful item, but it was also an intimate one, intended to be held close to the face, to touch the lips. To receive it was a sign of great favor. In return, a lady might give a token of her own. She might gift you one of her ribbons or a small piece of jewelry. To wear her ribbon pinned to your hat or your sleeve at a tournament was a public declaration of your devotion, broadcasting to the entire world that you were her champion. One especially curious courtship gift was the love apple. This wasn't a piece of fruit you could eat. An Elizabethan gentleman might carry a peeled apple in his armpit for a time, allowing it to become thoroughly saturated with his unique personal scent. He would then present this fragrant, or perhaps pungent, globe to the lady he was wooing. If she accepted it and held it to her nose, it was a sign that she found him appealing. It's a custom that puts a whole new spin on personal fragrance, suggesting a level of olfactory intimacy that is difficult for our modern, sanitized sensibilities to comprehend. The exchange of these items created a tangible, visible bond between the two of you. This public performance of affection was crucial, particularly in the royal court, where Queen Elizabeth I herself set the ultimate example. Though she cultivated a courtly environment where her male favorites were expected to act like languishing lovers, showering her with poetry and extravagant praise. This cult of Gloriana made the performance of love a matter of political importance, and the fashion trickled down through every level of the gentry. To court successfully was to prove you belonged in polite society. However, all this symbolism raises a fascinating question that keeps historians intrigued. Historians still argue whether the complex and often obscure allegories used in Elizabethan poetry and gifts were a universally understood language or simply a fashionable game for the educated elite. When a suitor presented a gift of a tiny, jeweled padlock, was the recipient truly meant to understand it as a plea for her to lock her heart to all others, or was it more of a lovely, expensive trinket whose precise meaning was less important than the fact that it was given? It's possible that for many, the performance of courtship was a bit like attending an opera in a language you don't speak. You appreciate the artistry and the beautiful costumes, even if you're not entirely sure what everyone is singing about. Gradually, as the chaperoned visits continue, and the exchange of scented apples and sonnets deepens, a genuine familiarity. Perhaps you discover a shared sense of humor in a sideways glance when your chaperone nods off for a moment. Perhaps the quality of the poetry improves, shifting from stiff classical allusions to a more personal observation. You move beyond the strictures of the business deal and the rigid performance, finding the vague outlines of a person you might actually, one day, grow to love. This slow, cautious thaw is the true goal of this elaborate ritual, to gently nurture a fragile shoot of affection. In the highly cultivated and very crowded garden of your engagement, the scented apple your intended gave you, remember that curiously fragrant globe, now sits carefully wrapped in linen, tucked away in a wooden chest. The sonnets have grown fewer, replaced by a quiet, comfortable familiarity that has taken root in the silent spaces left by the chaperone's clicking needles. The performance of courtship has been a success. Now it is time to move from poetry to promises, from symbolic gestures to acts that carry real, tangible weight. This is the stage where the union is solidified, not yet in the eyes of the entire community, but in the eyes of God, the law, and each other. The gifts you exchange become heavier, both literally and figuratively, laden with the gravity of a future taking shape. It begins, most famously, with a ring, but not necessarily a diamond. That was a fancy far in the future. An Elizabethan betrothal ring was a symbol of a different kind. You might receive a gimel ring, a beautiful and clever device made of 2, or sometimes 3, interlocking bands. When joined together, they form a single, complete ring. During the betrothal, you would each wear one of the separate bands. It was a visible sign that you were part of a pair, a promise yet to be wholly fulfilled. On the wedding day, the bands would be rejoined and given to the bride to wear as her wedding ring. Circle, a puzzle solved. It's a wonderfully tactile metaphor for 2 lives becoming one. Or perhaps you are given a posy ring. On the outside, it appears to be a simple band of gold or silver, but engraved on the hidden inner surface, pressed against the skin, is a short inscription, a little rhyme or posy. This wasn't epic poetry. Think less shall I compare thee to a summer's day, and more, in thee my choice, I do rejoice. They were the Elizabethan equivalent of a candy heart or a short, sweet social media bio, a secret message known only to the wearer and the giver. They were charmingly earnest, sometimes a little clumsy, but intensely personal. This desire to hide a heartfelt, slightly goofy message inside a piece of formal jewelry is a wonderfully human touch. These gifts were not merely sentimental. They were evidence. This brings us to the crucial moment of this phase of courtship, the formal betrothal or handfasting. This was far more than a simple engagement party. In many cases, it was a ceremony that created a contract nearly as unbreakable as marriage itself. This ritual didn't necessarily have to take place in a church. It could happen in the parlor of your home, with only your immediate families as witnesses. You and your intended stand facing one another. You join your right hands. The priest, if present, or even the patriarch of the family, might then wrap your joined hands with a ribbon or a strip of cloth, literally tying the knot. This physical bond is the heart of the ceremony. Then come the words, and the tense of the verbs is absolutely critical. You will make a vout sponsalia de praesenti, a betrothal in the present tense. You do not say, I will take you as my wife. You say, I do take you as my wife. This was a mainstream, legally recognized principle in England. A formal declaration made in the present tense, witnessed and followed by the exchange of a token like a ring, constituted a valid and binding marriage in the eyes of canon law. Even without a priest, even without a church, if you said the words and meant them, you were, for most intents and purposes, married. Getting out of it would be a legal and social nightmare, more complex than extricating yourself from a modern cell phone contract with a terrible cancellation policy. This legal gravity of a simple promise leads to a persistent scholarly debate. Historians and legal scholars still debate the extent to which these handfastings were understood by the common populace. For the gentry and nobility, with lawyers present to draft meticulous contracts, the lines were clear, but among the wider population was a handfasting seen as the final word, or was it more of a trial marriage, a binding betrothal that still awaited its final sanctification? In a church, the records are filled with messy legal cases where one person claimed a valid marriage existed based on a handfasting vow, while the other party conveniently denied it ever happened. It seems that I do could sometimes be a very flexible phrase, depending on how things went afterwards, after the knot has been tied and the vows have been spoken. The atmosphere shifts subtly. The chaperone might still be present, but her vigilance may relax. There is a new intimacy permitted. You might now be allowed to sit closer together, to share a private conversation without a nervous uncle hovering nearby. The exchange of tokens may become even more personal. It was at this point that some betrothed couples would exchange bodily fluids, not in the way you might immediately think, but through a shared cup. Drinking wine from the same goblet was a powerful symbol of your new shared life. Sharing saliva in a world deeply conscious of sickness and health was a sign of profound trust and intimacy. One particularly intimate token, less alarming than the scented apple, was the true love knot. This motif, a series of interlocking knots with no beginning and no end, became a popular symbol of eternal love. A man might give his betrothed a pendant in the shape of such a knot, or she might embroider the design onto a shirt for him. It was a quiet, constant reminder of the vow that had been made, a symbol of a bond that was now legally and socially secure. Objects were anchors, physical proof of the spiritual and contractual knot you had tied with your words and your hands. You now exist in a strange and unique limbo. You are not single, but you are not yet fully married in the public sense. You do not yet live together, but your lives are legally intertwined. The anxious period of negotiation is over. The theatrical performance of early courtship is done. What remains is a quiet, anticipatory waiting. You have learned the business of the alliance and performed the poetry of affection. You have held hands, exchanged rings with secret messages, and made a promise so strong it has the weight of law. You are bound, and the whole world is about to be invited to celebrate it. The time for private vows and hidden messages is drawing to a close, making way for the noise, the feasting, and the public spectacle of the wedding day itself. The true love knot embroidered on your sleeve feels heavier today, imbued with a finality. that sends a quiet tremor through your hands. The period of waiting is over. All the carefully negotiated contracts, the stilted parlor visits, the endless sonnets about your beloved's eyebrow. It has all led to this, your wedding day. But before the feasting and the dancing can begin, there is one last public hurdle to clear, one final, formal announcement that broadcasts your union not just to your immediate family, but to the entire parish and by extension, to all of officialdom. This is the crying of the banns. For 3 consecutive Sundays, in the main church service, your local priest stands before the congregation and announces your intention to marry. He will state your names and ask if anyone knows of any lawful impediment to the union. It is, in effect, a last call for objections. It's a beautifully simple and surprisingly effective system for preventing bigamy or other illegal unions. This is the moment for a spurned lover from a neighboring village, or a creditor to whom your future father-in-law owes a significant sum, to speak now or forever, hold their peace. Imagine sitting in the hard wooden pew, trying to look serene and pious, while your names echo through the church, praying that no unexpected drama erupts from the back row. It must have been the longest 3 weeks of an Elizabethan's life. But the banns are read without incident. The final Sunday passes, and now the morning of the ceremony arrives. You are dressed in your absolute finest. This does not necessarily mean a white dress for the bride. That tradition comes much, much later. A bride of a wealthy family would wear the most sumptuous and expensive gown she owned, a testament to her family status. It would likely be made of velvet or brocade, in a rich, deep color like crimson or dark blue, possibly interwoven with gold or silver thread. She might wear a headdress of rosemary, a herb that symbolized fidelity and remembrance. The groom, too, would be a peacock, eager to display his family's wealth and his own sense of style. This is no time for quiet modesty. You are putting on a show for the entire community. The ceremony itself takes place not in a private side chapel, but on the church porch, right at the main doors. Crucial detail: a marriage was a public contract, a community affair, and conducting the most important part of the rite outdoors, for all the world to see, reinforced this idea. You meet at the threshold of the sacred space. Here, on the weathered stone steps, you will once again join hands. Remember that binding vow you made during the handfasting, the sponsalie de presenti. You now repeat a version of it, but this time with the full weight of the church, the priest, and the entire assembled village as your witnesses. The priest blesses the ring, the same one that was likely part of your betrothal, and you, the groom, place it on your bride's finger. Following a charming and quirky tidbit of tradition, you would place the ring on her thumb, then her index finger, then her middle finger, before finally settling it on the 4th finger, all while reciting the names of the Holy Trinity. With the vows said and the ring placed, the public, contractual part of the wedding is complete. You are now man and wife. The priest then leads you and your entire wedding party inside the church for a special nuptial mass. This second part of the ceremony is the spiritual sanctification of the bond that has just been legally forged on the doorstep. The atmosphere inside the church is one of sober reverence, the air thick with incense and the sound of chanted prayers. But you can feel the energy of the crowd behind you, a low hum of anticipation. They are waiting for the feast, and what a feast it would be. After the solemnity of the Mass, you emerge from the church into a joyful explosion of noise and celebration. The procession back to the family home would be a raucous affair. Musicians strike up a lively tune on pipes and drums. Well-wishers might throw grains of wheat over you, an ancient symbol of fertility and prosperity, the precursor to our modern tradition of throwing confetti or rice. It would be less a dignified walk and more a happy, noisy parade, winding its way through the lanes, gathering more well-wishers as it goes. The wedding feast is the centerpiece of the celebration. There would be pies filled with spiced meats, roasted fowl, and, for the wealthy, perhaps perhaps even elaborate sugar sculptures called subtleties that were designed to impress the guests. Ale and wine flow freely. There would be toasts, dancing, and entertainments. It is here that a fundamental historical debate finds its expression. Historians still argue about how much these riotous wedding feasts were a genuinely joyful community celebration versus a carefully calculated display of status. Was your father's generosity with the wine barrel a sign of his happiness, or a strategic move to show his neighbors just how solvent and powerful he was? In all likelihood, it was both. Generosity and social posturing were two sides of the same very shiny coin. As the evening wears on and the celebrating reaches its peak, one final, and for us, profoundly strange, ritual must take place. The bedding ceremony. This was not a private, romantic conclusion to your evening. The bride would be playfully kidnapped by her bridesmaids and taken to the bedchamber to be undressed and put to bed. At the same time, the groom's friends would do the same for him. Then, the entire wedding party, family and guests alike, would escort the groom to the bedchamber and tuck the new couple into bed together. The priest might even enter the room to bless the marriage bed itself, praying for fertility and happiness. Everyone would then share one last cup of spiced wine or broth with the couple in bed, before finally, leaving them alone. It is a moment of communal participation that strikes our modern minds as a shocking invasion of privacy. Yet for Elizabethans, it was a vital act. It was the ultimate witnessing, the community's final stamp of approval, leaving no doubt that the marriage had been consummated and the union was well and truly complete. Left in the quiet dark, the scent of rosemary and spiced wine lingering in the air. You are finally alone. The long, strange journey is over. From a business negotiation between families to a clumsy poem, from a scented apple to a binding promise on a church porch, you lie beside a person who was once a stranger, a name in a ledger. Now they are your spouse, your partner, in the long, uncertain business of life. You have followed every rule, performed every ritual, and fulfilled every expectation. And in the profound quiet, long after the laughter of your guests has faded, you are left with the rest of your life to discover the difference between a good match and a true love. Peculiar postal systems of the Mongol Empire, eh? The first thing you become aware of is the sky. It is immense, impossibly vast, a dome of pale blue that stretches from one curved edge of the world to the other. There are no buildings to interrupt its sweep, no trees to break its clean line against the horizon. Down here, on the ground, the land is just as unending. It is a sea of grass, rolling away in every direction, its color shifting from sage to gold to a deep, earthy brown under the slow drift of the clouds. The only sound is the wind. It is a constant, restless presence, whispering through the dry grass, pulling at the sleeves of your felt coat and carrying with it the faint, clean scent of dust and wild herbs. There is nothing else. No roads, no fences, no comforting signs of civilization. Just the sky, the grass, and the wind. You are astride a horse, not a tall, elegant steed from a romance, but a short, shaggy, impossibly tough creature with a wild look in its eye. Its gait is a steady, ground-eating trot, a rhythm that has become the background music of your life. Every muscle in your body aches with a deep, liquid fire. Your thighs burn, your spine feels compressed, and you're fairly certain your soul has been bruised from the constant, jarring motion. You've been riding for days, or maybe it's weeks. Time has lost its sharp edges out here, melting into a blurry cycle of dawn, unrelenting sun, dusk, and the deep, cold dark of a starry night. You can't even remember what a comfortable chair feels like. The idea of one is a distant, luxurious dream. This immense, soul-crushing emptiness is the Mongol Empire, and it is your job to cross it. From the capital at Karakoram, orders and intelligence must flow outwards, to the edges of Persia, to the forests of Rus, to the very doorstep of Europe. This empire wasn't just conquered with the bow and the horse, and it is held together by something far more sophisticated, and in many ways, more brutal. It is held together by speed. The great Khan, the ruler of this sprawling domain, faces a problem of unimaginable scale. He is one man trying to control a landmass so enormous it would laugh at our modern map apps, and they're pathetic. Are we there yet? Timelines. The roaming charges would be astronomical. An army on one side of the empire might be defeated before the Khan even receives news that it was under attack. A governor in a distant province could decide to rebel, and he would have months of unchecked freedom before a punitive force could even be mustered. The greatest enemy of the Khan is not another king or a rival tribe. It is distance. A slow message is a useless message. And so, to defeat distance, the empire relies on you, not you personally, but on the system you are a part of. The YAM, the most sophisticated and ruthlessly efficient postal system the world had ever seen. Genghis Khan himself laid its foundations, but it was his son and successor, Ugaday, who truly perfected it into the logistical marvel that stitches this empire together. It is the nervous system of the conquest state. You, the rider, are merely a nerve impulse, a flash of information traveling along a predetermined pathway, and you are expected to move at the speed of thought, or at least at the speed of a series of very, very fast horses. As you ride, you feel the weight of your responsibility. Tucked inside your coat is a sealed pouch, its contents unknown to you. It could be a command for a general to attack. It could be a tax assessment for a newly conquered city. It could be a single line of intelligence about troop movements 1,000 miles away. You do not know, and you do not need to know. Your ignorance is part of the security of the system. Your job is not to understand, but to ride, and you must ride as if the fate of the empire itself rests upon your aching shoulders. Because in a very real sense, it does. You've been granted no distractions, no podcasts to listen to, no news feeds to scroll through in a fit of despair. There is only the wind, the rhythmic beat of hooves, and the silent, urgent imperative to keep moving forward. Twig. Historians still argue whether the YAM's true genius lay in its raw speed, or in its unprecedented scale and centralization. Other civilizations had postal relays, of course. The Romans had their cursus publicus, but the Mongol system was something else entirely. It was an imperial artery, standardized and centrally controlled, pulsing with a relentless rhythm across a continent. It was for official use only. A private merchant couldn't just drop a letter in a mailbox and expect it to reach his cousin in Samarkand. This was the exclusive communication network of the ruler. It was the instrument of his will, a way to project his authority across landscapes that would have taken any other ruler a lifetime to traverse. Your horse, your shaggy, tireless companion, is the true, unsung hero of this system. These Mongolian ponies are a wonder of biological engineering. They are small but incredibly hardy, able to survive on scant grazing, endure extreme temperatures, and cover enormous distances. They have a stamina that verges on the supernatural. They are the engine of this network, and the YAM is designed to get the absolute most out of them and out of you. You ride with a singular focus, because to be a messenger for the Khan is to have a strange kind of power. Your needs supersede almost everyone else's. If you require a fresh horse from a village herd, you can take it. If you need food or shelter, a local headman is obligated to provide it, lest he face the unimaginable wrath of an empire that has very little patience for inefficiency. It's a curious thought that you, a single sore-bottomed rider covered in dust, are simultaneously a humble servant and a figure of immense, if temporary, authority. This pressure sometimes made the YAM riders deeply unpopular with the locals who had to support the system. This created a fringe problem for the administration, ensuring the relay stations were properly supplied without completely alienating the local populace whose herds and crops were being constantly levied. The sun begins to dip towards the horizon, painting the vast sky in brutal shades of orange and purple. The wind grows colder. Just as your spirit begins to sink with the sun, just as you start to believe that this sea of grass truly has no shore, you see it, a dark speck in the distance. It is not a trick of the light, not a wandering animal. It has shape. As you draw closer, hour after weary hour, the speck resolves itself. It's a smudge of smoke rising straight into the windless evening air, and beneath it, a low, dark shape. A building, an outpost of humanity in this overwhelming void. It is a relay station, an island of safety in the great grass sea. It is your destination for the night. But it is not the end of your journey. It is merely a pause, a place to pass your vital message to the next link in the chain before the journey continues its relentless push onward, You slide off your horse and your legs almost forget how to be legs. They are jelly, trembling with exhaustion and the strange disconnected feeling of being back on solid ground. The horse, your loyal engine for the past several hours, is lathered in sweat, its sides heaving. Its job is done. Your job is nearly done, but not quite. You are at a yam, or in some tellings, a jamchi station, a word that simply means station or post house, and it is far from a luxurious travel lodge. From the outside, it looks more like a fortified farmhouse that has hunkered down to brace against the eternal wind. It's a low-slung building, made of packed earth or rough-hewn timbers, surrounded by a sturdy stockade. The most important feature isn't the building itself, but the vast corrals next to it, which hold the lifeblood of this entire enterprise. Horses. You are greeted at the gate, not with a smile, but with an economy of motion. The station master, the Yamchi, emerges. He is a man whose face looks like a weathered map of the steppe, his eyes narrowed against a lifetime of wind and dust. He doesn't ask how your journey was. He doesn't offer you a warm drink. Not yet. His first priority is the pouch you carry. You hand it over, the leather smooth and worn from your grip. His second priority, another man, his face as grimly determined as yours was this morning, materializes from the smoky interior of the station house. He takes the pouch, bows his head in a curt acknowledgement, and strides towards the corral where a fresh horse, already saddled, is being held. There is no waste. Within minutes of your arrival, the message you have carried all day is once again flying across the steppe, swallowed by the falling darkness. Only now, with the great chain of information unbroken, does the station master turn his attention to you. You are led into the main building. The air inside is thick with the smells of mutton stew, sour mare's milk, and the sweet, cloying scent of burning dung, the primary fuel of the treeless steppe. The interior is dim, lit by a few flickering tallow lamps that cast long, dancing shadows on the walls. The central room is communal, a space for eating, sleeping, and waiting. Other riders, either heading in the opposite direction or resting before their own outward journey, sit on felt rugs around a central fire pit. They look up as you enter, a silent acknowledgement passing between you. You are all brothers in the same weary fraternity of speed and saddle sores. No one here needs to be told how you are feeling. They already know. It would be like a group of fish getting together to complain about being wet. You are given a bowl of hot, greasy stew and a skin of arag, the famous fermented mare's milk that is the national drink of the Mongols. It's sour, slightly effervescent, and packs a surprising punch. To your depleted body, this simple meal is more satisfying than the most decadent feast. You sit and eat, the warmth of the fire slowly seeping into your chilled bones. There's little talk. You might exchange a few terse words about the condition of the trail or the quality of the horses at the last station, but small talk is this place is not designed for comfort. It is designed for function. Its sole purpose is to shelter the riders and to maintain a massive reserve of fresh horses. Some sources, like the famed Venetian traveler Marco Polo, claimed that each station maintained a herd of up to some bite horses, ready to be deployed at a moment's notice. That number is almost certainly an exaggeration for most stations, but the core truth remains: the investment in horseflesh was colossal. The upkeep of these stations was a major logistical challenge and a heavy burden on the local population. Each station was responsible for maintaining its buildings, feeding the riders, and, most importantly, feeding and managing the hundreds of horses. This was funded by a tax levied on the local communities. Each household within a certain radius was obligated to provide not only a quota of livestock, fodder, and milk, but also personnel to serve at the station. This has led to an interesting question that historians still explore. How did the Mongols manage to enforce compliance across such a vast and sparsely populated area? It appears the answer lies in a combination of ruthless efficiency and collective punishment. If one family failed to meet their quota, the entire community might be penalized. The Khan's command was absolute, and the needs of the yam system trumped any local hardship. This made the yam both an instrument of imperial unity and a tool of systematic local oppression. After your meal, you are shown to a space to sleep. There are no private rooms. You are given a rough woolen blanket and a spot on the floor or on a low platform shared with several other riders. The snoring is prodigious. It is not the restful, quiet sleep of a country inn. It is the deep, exhausted, comatose slumber of men who have pushed their bodies to the absolute limit. You fall asleep instantly, the aches and pains of your journey temporarily fading into the blessed oblivion of unconsciousness. But you know that this rest is temporary. In a day, perhaps two, you will be expected to be the fresh rider, waiting for the next weary soul to stumble in from the opposite direction, ready to take up his pouch and ride back into the great emptiness. The role of these yam stations in Mongol society was far more than just a place to swap horses. They were a visible, tangible symbol of the Khan's power, even in the most remote corners of his domain. Each station, a tiny island of imperial authority in a vast sea of grass, was a constant reminder to local chieftains and nomadic clans of who was ultimately in charge. They were the nodes that connected the periphery to the center, ensuring that no part of the empire was ever truly cut off. The system was shockingly robust. Marco Polo described how riders often tied bells to their belts, the sound of which could be heard from a great distance, giving the next station advance warning to prepare a fresh horse. The goal was to minimize the time spent on the ground. A rider would arrive, leap from his tired horse, jump onto a fresh one, and be gone in a matter of minutes. For urgent messages, the relays continued day and night, riders navigating by stars and an innate knowledge of the landscape, creating a continuous, hour river of information. The yam didn't just make communication faster, it nearly annihilated the concept of night as a barrier to imperial governance. You lie on the floor, listening to the wind howl outside, a temporary pause in a system that never, ever sleeps. Crow. The grey light of dawn seeps into the station house, cold and unforgiving. Another day begins, not with a gentle awakening, but with the clatter of bowls and the businesslike preparations of men about to face the step. You might have another day to rest, your muscles slowly knitting themselves back together, or you might be the next rider out. When the time comes, you are given your horse, your rations of dried meat and grain, and most importantly, your passport to power. It's not a flimsy piece of paper, but a heavy tablet of authority, a paisa. This is your license to ride. You loop the tablet's cord around your neck. The metal cool against your skin. It feels heavy, a constant physical reminder of your duty. These paisa were one of the most ingenious administrative tools of the Mongol Empire. They were official passports, granting the bearer specific rights and privileges. They came in different materials, each signifying a different level of authority. A tablet of wood or bronze might be for a low-ranking official or a non-urgent messenger, but the most important envoys, those carrying the Khan's most urgent commands, were given a paisa of silver, or even solid gold. To see one of these gleaming tablets was to see the Khan's authority made manifest. It commanded instant respect and, more importantly, instant compliance. As a rider for the Yum, your paisa is your key to the empire. When you gallop into a village, looking for provisions or a fresh horse, you don't have time to haggle or persuade. You simply display the tablet. The sight of it, this gleaming symbol of the state, would trigger immediate action. The local headman, under penalty of severe punishment, was obligated to provide you with anything you needed: a fresh mount, food for yourself, fodder for the horse, a guide if the terrain was unfamiliar. It was a system that functioned on a foundation of pure, unadulterated authority, and it made you, a humble messenger, temporarily more powerful than a wealthy local merchant or a minor chieftain. You essentially had an unlimited credit card backed by the most fearsome military power on the planet. Any disputes with a transaction would be settled later, likely with a visit from a less friendly agent of the Khan. The paisa itself was often beautifully inscribed. Inscriptions were typically in several languages to be understood across the vast Peng polyglot empire, Mongolian script, but also possibly Persian, Chinese, or Turkic languages. The message was always some variation of the same unwavering command, issued in the name of the eternal sky, the divine source of the Khan's power. It would read something like, by the command of the ever-living Khan, let the man who does not show respect and obedience to this tablet be judged and killed. It's hard to imagine a clearer set of terms and conditions. Carrying this tablet is both a privilege and a terrible burden. You must ride with a special kind of urgency, not just for the sake of the message, but for your own life. Legend and travelers' accounts, such as those from Marco Polo, describe how urgent messengers would bind themselves tightly around the abdomen, chest, and head with cloth straps. The purpose of this was twofold. First, it was meant to help the rider endure the extreme physical punishment of riding for 24 hours straight or more, effectively holding their organs in place against the constant, violent jarring. Second, it was a visual sign of extreme urgency. A rider wrapped in this way was clearly carrying a message of life or death, a command that could not brook even a moment's delay. The physical act of binding your own body was a declaration that you were temporarily ceasing to be a normal human and becoming a living arrow shot from the bow of the Khan himself. There is a historical debate that swirls around this very practice. Historians still argue whether this tight binding of messengers was a common, standardized practice for the most urgent messages, or a more sensational, exaggerated detail recounted by foreign observers who were trying to convey the incredible speed and brutality of the Yam. While the system was undoubtedly demanding, was this level of physical self-mortification a requirement, or was it a storyteller's flourish, a way to make an already incredible system seem utterly superhuman? It is possible that the truth lies somewhere in between, a practice reserved for only the most desperate of messages, which then became emblematic of the entire system and the telling. Your life as a rider is also governed by a strict set of protocols. You must follow the designated route, never deviating. The stations are your only stops, and you must not harm the horse, the true engine of your speed. One fascinating fringe detail of the Yam system was the punishment for a messenger who rode his horse to death through negligence. While you were expected to push your mount hard, running the animal into the ground was considered a grave offense, a dereliction of duty that damaged the precious infrastructure of the empire. This created a strange balancing act. You had to ride as fast as humanly possible, but not so fast that you destroyed the very tool that gave you that speed. It's a level of micromanagement that speaks to the Mongol genius for logistics, understanding that the system was only as strong as its most fundamental component, The horse. So you ride, the heavy tablet banging against your sternum with every stride. The landscape unfolds before you, unchanging. A valley looks the same as the last valley. A plain is indistinguishable from the 100 plains that came before it. You are utterly alone, but you are also inextricably connected to the network. You are a single, anonymous cell in the vast circulatory system of the Empire. You don't know the faces of the riders who came before you, or those who will come after, but you are linked to them by the silent, urgent imperative contained in the pouch you carry, and the golden tablet that guarantees your way. The message is everything, and you, the rider, are both its master and its slave, granted absolute power over your immediate surroundings, but utterly subject to the demands of your mission. Days bleed into nights, and nights into days. The ache in your bones has become a constant companion, a dull, familiar thrum beneath the rhythmic pounding of hooves. The golden pazer, your burdensome pass to power, has worn a smooth patch on your coat. You have passed through dozens of stations, seen countless riders melt into the opposite horizon, and consumed more mutton stew than you thought humanly possible. As you ride, you begin to understand the true nature of the yam. It is more than just a postal service. It is the network of veins and arteries through which the lifeblood of an entire world flows, and you are witnessing firsthand how it is changing everything. While your primary purpose is to carry the Khan's commands, you are not the only person using this network. Though it began as a system exclusively for official imperial communication, its very efficiency made it an irresistible pathway for other things. High-ranking officials, visiting dignitaries, and approved merchants were also granted paisas, allowing them to travel with a speed and safety that was previously unimaginable. Imagine you are a Venetian merchant, like Marco Polo. Suddenly, the journey to the fabled lands of the East is no longer a perilous, multi-year gamble. It's a hard journey, yes, but a structured one. A journey along a secure corridor with guaranteed food, shelter, and fresh horses. You're not wandering into the unknown. You're traveling on the world's most extensive, state-sponsored highway. This reliable artery of transit and communication fostered an unprecedented level of exchange across Eurasia. It was the backbone of what historians call the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace. By connecting the disparate parts of their vast conquest under a single administrative umbrella, the Mongols created a continental free trade zone. A merchant could now travel from Persia to China with a relative degree of safety, his goods protected and his journey expedited by the very system you now ride upon. Remember the scented apple from our Elizabethan courtship story? Now imagine not an apple, but a bale of fine silk, a pouch of rare spices, or a set of delicate porcelain bowls, all making their way across the continent with the same relentless, yam-powered speed. Gunpowder technology, papermaking, and printing techniques traveled west, while advancements in Persian astronomy and mathematics flowed east. The yam wasn't just carrying letters, it was carrying the future. This massive cross-continental exchange leads to one of the most significant and fiercely debated questions in world history. To what extent was the Mongol Empire, and the yam system specifically, responsible for the calamitous outbreak of the Black Death in the 6th century? This is a heavy topic, a shadow that hangs over the empire's legacy. The argument is grimly logical. This incredible network, so efficient at moving messengers and merchants, was equally efficient at moving the microorganisms they carried. The plague began in the fleas carried by rodents, like marmots, on the Central Asian steppe. It's plausible, even likely, that the yam network provided the perfect conduit for the plague to travel, moving from station to station, from rider to horse, from caravan to city, the very system that connected the world and made it prosperous. May have also been the instrument of its most devastating pandemic. A station full of warm bodies and well-fed animals would have been a paradise for a traveling flea. You would see hints of this darker side on your journey. Perhaps you arrive at a station to find its keepers sullen and frightened, whispering of a strange sickness that has afflicted a nearby encampment. Or maybe you notice a sudden drop in trade traffic, the usual trickle of merchant caravans dwindling to nothing. For you, the imperative is to keep riding, but you are not immune. The speed required of you makes you a terrifyingly effective potential vector for disease, moving faster than news of the outbreak itself. Even the food provided by the system has a peculiar story. As a yam rider, you would have often been supplied with a sort of proto-superfood for the road. The Mongols were masters of preserving food for long journeys, and one of their staples was borts. This was beef, cut into long strips and air-dried until it was rock-hard and incredibly lightweight. The strips would then be ground into a coarse, fibrous powder. This powder could be stored indefinitely and was easily rehydrated in hot water to create a nourishing broth or stew. A small bag of borts could sustain a rider for a very long time. It's a curiously efficient piece of culinary technology, the shoe 10th century equivalent of a high-protein energy bar designed for maximum nutrition, with an entire cow could be condensed into a single bag, ready to fuel your desperate ride across the plains. Your final destination is in sight. It is not just another station, but a city, a swirling metropolis of felt yurts and bustling markets. Your journey is ending. You deliver your pouch for the last time. Your duty is fulfilled. You are no longer an instrument of the state, but a person again. You can walk on steady legs. You can sleep in a bed without the phantom motion of a horse beneath you. The silence, now that you've stopped, is the loudest thing you've ever heard. You have crossed a continent. You have been a link in a chain that changed the world, a chain forged from grass, horses, and the unrelenting will of a single ruler. The yam stitched together empires, facilitated the exchange of goods and ideas that shaped civilizations, and perhaps even carried the seeds of a global catastrophe. It was the great paradox of the Mongol age, a system that brought the world closer together, for better and for worse, and you, with your aching muscles and your memories of the endless windy sea of grass, were a fleeting, forgotten, but absolutely essential part of it all.